want you to know that your Lakeland Electric staff, we've been following up on our plan. We've been looking at the action items, making assignments, and some of these, oddly enough, have become not quite as important as they were before, or we might be rearranging priorities some based on the current situation, but we'll step through where we are today. And with that, I'll ask our man, Mr. Clark Freed, to take it away and step us through it.
Oh, thank you very much. I just want to make sure the presentation is on your screen there.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, utility committee members and members of the City Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you again. I was last before you on February 3rd and presenting the results of the strategic objective. This is an opportunity 3 months later to come back and give you an update of what these objectives look like, a little bit of the action items that have been completed, as well as what we're looking at moving forward. So don't want to take too much of your time, but here we go. Just as a brief review, our strategy retreat was held back in January of 2020. In attendance in that strategy retreat, please remember Commissioner Madden was there, as well as Utility Committee member Dennis was there as well. So we appreciate the support from the Utility Committee as well as from the City Commission. Thank you very much. And our objective in this is taking a look at a 3 to 5 year strategic look ahead of us. Recognizing the vision for Lakeland Electric is truly to be the best municipal utility in the country. That is our vision for the future. So they were gathered in pre-retreat conversations and meetings that were held. We flushed these out well during the retreat. The fifth item on our list, security, really came up as an item during the retreat. So we took the next several weeks after the retreat to flush these out with staff, and we've got a little more to present for you this afternoon. And our current strategic objectives document was shared with all of the retreat participants once it was put together. So diving into objective number 1, which is the issues and opportunities around Unit 3 and the action items. Specifically, we're looking at the first item here, replacement of Unit 3. The Next Gen program has been reviewed and conceptually approved by this body a couple of last month and the month before as briefings have continued. The next step for us is to be able to bring specific recommendations along with price tag, funding proposal, and timeline. We'll be working on bringing that to you later on this summer. The second item here is a communications plan for Lakeland Electric, the city, our customers, and our stakeholders. This is being developed right now and will be developed over the next several months by our marketing department, Catherine Lacey, and Charlie Martin, working together to craft this communications plan. And thirdly, identifying and assisting affected employees will be a high priority for Lakeland Electric over the next 4 years. Objective number 2 is our workforce management. We recognize that retirement of critical positions and signal contributors can create a strain on our organization. That's why work has begun to identify our fiscal year 21 retirements. And by the end of this year, we plan to have a long-range strategy in place to look at our aging workforce and our retirements, especially in those critical positions and single contributors. Next, our new, young, eager employees. We know that they have different needs from their more seasoned counterparts. Yet we do need to attract and retain both sets of these folks. Working with LE staff and HR, we hope by the end of the year to be able to develop some appropriate flexibility in our hiring practices to be able to attract both of these market segments to Lakeland Electric. And finally, retaining good employees helps everyone succeed. We desire to find creative ways to not only attract but retain good employees through more additional education and training, Working together, we are confident that HR and our LA staff can find workable solutions. The item that everybody's excited about is financial management. Fiscal operations is focused right now on monitoring the dividend formula and ensuring equity for the city and for LE. This process will continue, but it is exceptionally highlighted as a strategic objective due to the inherent value that this dividend brings to the city. So we need to keep this as an objective for us. Secondly, moving on, due to the potential impact of COVID-19, as well as our investment in future generation, focus on days cash on hand, focus on debt, and focus on controlling our capital spending will be major priorities for fiscal operations here over the next 6 to 9 months and even beyond. Looking down further, we see the promotion of electric vehicles as strategic to any utility, as the growth of the EV market is great potential for increased sales for utilities, but also increased complexity. For this reason, LE has gone ahead and begun looking into expanding our EV charging stations with the use of a potential grant funding. Details of this project will be shared with you as they become available. Lakeland Electric will continue looking for other cost-effective ways to promote electric vehicles in our service territory. And finally on the list here, an overhauled rate structure is necessary in the near future to be able to better recover our fixed costs. However, due to the potential economic impact of COVID-19, this objective is being pushed back a couple of years. Objective number 4 is on our customer service. The action items for our customer service, you can see here, improved interaction with our customers through the new billing format, which has been completed, as well as the website, which will be coming soon, will both have positive impacts on our customer engagement. The collaboration that has already started between customer service and delivery teams will pay dividends on our customer service, as well as we seek to provide the right answer to our customers, no matter who they may be talking to. This development of ongoing collaboration will continue as the summer progresses. Like it or not, Google and social media ratings do matter. This is why we're setting a plan in place to improve our Google and social media ratings. This project will be starting and kicking off sometime this summer. Finally, a true seamless integration of information between being available to our customers and their ability to interact with us remotely on a 24/7 basis is a huge undertaking. It really is. Our goal for this will be to get it through us in the next 4 to 5 years. Finally, as we look at security, physical security specifically, improvements include pin pad access to the LE admin building, which should be completed this summer, an expansion of our shotgun detection and active shooter training later on this year, expected completion in December. We know that additional IT governance has been identified as an opportunity. An updated governance framework is due to be reported on this summer. NERC has recently completed an audit of our security, and LE is actively working on the gap analysis, and completion of this gap analysis will be done in the fall. And long-term, cybersecurity will continue to be evaluated on an enterprise basis and solutions developed as appropriate. This completes the 5 objectives, major strategic objectives Lakeland Electric is looking at, and we will be continuing to coming back to this body for reviews on a regular basis. So thank you very much for your attention to these. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Clark. Are there any questions from any of the utility committee members? I have to look across. Commissioner Walker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And maybe Mr. Clark may be not the one to address this question, it may come from Mr. Ivy. But, because of what we approved to do and to be able to support our citizenry here, our residents, our ratepayers, I should say, here at Lake Electric for the next couple of months, and giving the lower, reduced base rate kind of situation as we are experiencing. Do you have any idea right now, any known impacts financially at this time that we may have to deal with when it comes to the finance, overall finance picture of Lakeland Electric? I know we mentioned, it was mentioned as we took the reduction that in June we'll look back and see where we are moving forward. But anything else that we may know about at this point financially moving forward?
Well, great question, Commissioner, and it's going to lead right into the very next presentation. Mr. Jacoby is going to step us through that. But I will say we did a reduction in the fuel rate, and the reason that we did it was because we've been harboring about a $10 million over collection for quite some time. And because natural gas prices have just gone down and down and down, it just never seemed like there's a bottom to it. We've had a hard time keeping up with lowering our rate to counteract the rate at which the prices of natural gas were going down. So because of that, we did that drastic reduction in the prices for the fuel rate, which for 2 months. And we're hoping that we can give that $10 million over collection back by this September. That is our goal. So we're still on track to come back next month to try to reset the fuel rate, but we'll have that conversation in a month. And then the other impacts that I think you're alluding to, Ms. Jacoby is going to step us through those here in just a second.
Okay. Before we do that, let's go back to the strategic plan. And are there any other questions from any other committee members with respect to that? With the presentation up, I got to kind of pull this down a little bit to see everybody, so I apologize. I see no hands. Oh, wait, I see Mr. Johnson's hand up. Yes, sir.
About that.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, strategic objective number 3, keep focus on debt reduction. Has there been any hard look at exactly how much money we owe, what we owe it for, and how the retirement of Unit 3 is going to impact all of that? Because what I'm seeing is Unit 3 at this point has a book value of about $40 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. Is that right? You would, okay. I'm just wondering how we're going to structure the debt, how we're going to pay off. We got a couple of series that very little of the principal's been paid off on over the last several years. The series 2017, 2016, virtually none of that debt's been paid off at all. And that comprises about $225 million of the debt. Is that part of this plan, or do we going to restructure that or is that a question for Gina? I don't know, but I'm interested in how we're going to tackle the debt in light of we're trying to retire Unit 3 and bring on another unit.
So,
yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would suggest, in the interest of time, this is a presentation unto itself.
Okay.
And it's a very great concern and great question. We do anticipate all of our debt being wrapped up in that. We're actually just focused right now on the total that we've got, trying to get that as low as we possibly can. But at the same time, we've been taking steps to mitigate the outstanding debt that we've got related to Unit 3. And then a lot of the debt that we have is just being commingled to the point where it's kind of all in the same box together. But we've been paying down different tranches at different times. You know, we still have the one FRN hanging out there that we've been working on a little bit. We're whittling away at it. So making good progress. We've kind of set a goal to be below 55% debt to asset. Gina and Mike and Jeff Stearns have been doing a good job of making sure we stay in that category, in that range. So I'm pleased with where we're at. Mr. Johnson, and I think if we can have a conversation specifically on that, maybe even at the next meeting, I think that might be a better way to go about it.
Okay, that's fine.
It certainly is part of the 200.
Yes.
Yes. Anything else on the strategy itself? And I have a question or a recommendation, and it goes to surveying, and it's the Google survey, so it's just one sub point in this. But we really need to eagerly embrace ideas that allow positive customers to communicate on their input, because the bent of surveys is to turn the knife when I'm mad, as opposed to the people that are pleasantly pleased. So to the extent we can do some brainstorming in that regard, I think it would be a benefit to that end. Did I see Commissioner Walker? You have a question? Commissioner Madden, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Clark, for that great presentation. I know that you mentioned in your talking points that some of the things may have changed during the COVID pandemic. One of the things I wanted to bring up today was during the LEDC presentation, Steve Scruggs said that we had something to be thankful for with regard to how many people in Lakeland work for essential workforce companies, and how that really may be something that becomes more attractive to our skilled workforce when they're making a selection. And when we have learned in the last decade about millennials being more driven to changing their career trajectory, many times over a decade, I think that during this crisis, people could be more prone to look for something with security now that they've experienced a little economic volatility. So some of the things we talked about at the strategic plan were with regard to how do we become, a little more nimble and flexible and reach out, maybe paying for college costs, things like that. But I really believe that just going through what we've been through is a plus for a utility for those skilled workforce to maybe want to go towards something in the essential workforce category with the security of working for a city. So I felt, that was something that we based, from our strategic planning, that was kind of a negative for us, trying to, make more of a positive. Now I'm looking back thinking we might be more attractive than we once thought. And then I'm going to use an example of that, because when I came in, certainly, coming with a marketing background, having a marketing business for 25 years, I was frustrated and a little discouraged with our Google reviews, and, certainly made those known. And I'm so grateful that, the attention was brought towards marketing. But if you'll notice, there was a gentleman with us, and not for a very long time, who probably was older and had more experience. But when Catherine Lacey, a young talent, pivoted towards marketing for Lakeland Electric, we had a 115th birthday celebration campaign that really turned the heart of our community to vote in a way that showed that they really support our utility, and made it less, they did not want it to be easier to sell at the polls, I think, which was completely, in large part to our marketing campaign with Bump Galetta, a local artist, fresh, young design and logo. One of the things I keep saying is, marketing is about building brand love. And you could say, well, you're a monopoly. Why do you need brand love? I mean, they have nowhere else to go. But you need brand love when all of a sudden the world is worried about the health of the planet and wants you to go to renewable, by a certain date. You need brand love when you're up for vote on whether or not you're going to sell your utility, or someone else is attracted and wants to make that purchase. So I always say you have to be at the table, telling your story, or you're on the platter. And so I just want to use that example in the marketing department with Catherine Lacey. And I know it's a big team and there's other people involved, but how important it is for us to attract that young talent, to be relevant, especially in this industry that has moved very slowly, over a century, but could potentially move a lot more quickly over the next century with regard to renewables and such. So I think that, part of that strategic plan is our workforce. And as we are decommissioning our coal plant and as we are phasing out, I just think that, that's still, I'm glad that's a big part of this strategic plan is our workforce. But I really did want to bring attention to the young talent piece, to the marketing and the communication piece, to the telling your story piece, because I know sometimes that seems like just fluff and extra when you're talking about providing affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy and electricity to your citizenry. But I do think it's very powerful and important. So I appreciate everyone's effort, and I thank you for incorporating that in the strategic plan.
All excellent comments, Commissioner Madden. Any other comments? Mr. Ivey.
Okay, thanks everyone. And Commissioner Walker, you were leading right into this next presentation without realizing, but we appreciate that because your questions are right on point. We've all had the same things, same questions. Our industry, just like any other business, takes a hit during recessionary periods. That doesn't make us unique, but certainly it makes us have to stand up and pay attention. The COVID-19 ushered in some strange electricity usage patterns. I mean, you think about customers no longer showing up for work, being told to stay home, and schools closing, and many, many businesses were closing as well. Not for good, hopefully, but closing to not be, spreading the disease any further. So that changed our usage patterns all around our system, around the world, actually. Ms. Jacoby and her staff jumped on it, began early on to assess and model what we thought might be impacts from all this. And it became very clear very quickly that we were going to take prudent steps. We need to try and minimize the impact on our financials. And so we did. We started moving before a lot of other utilities were even taking action. We know very well that we also have to continue to create value, both to the customers we're serving and in the city that we partner so well with. So having set that up in that way, Ms. Jacoby is going to step us through what our financial modeling is showing. It's still kind of early on because we've only got like a month and a half or so into our financials, so we're still developing this as we go. But so I would urge some caution when you're looking at the numbers. But then after this, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have some follow-on conversations on some other steps that we're taking generally. Gina?
Okay, well, thanks, Joel. Good afternoon, everybody. As you know, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the future of our economy, and I, for one, don't have a crystal ball. Nonetheless, I'd like to provide you with some idea as to how we think LE is going to perform this year from a financial perspective. I'm going to begin with a look at our financials for the first half, and then I'm going to switch gears and address our forecast for the full year. So let's get started. Well, okay. The graph shown on the slide compares our budgeted net income before dividends of $9.7 million to what was actually earned, $19.8. The drivers of the $10.1 million favorable income variance are reflected by the green bars and include higher retail revenue, lower non-fuel O&M, and increased investment income. As you can see from the graph, retail revenue was $3.6 million above budget. This favorable variance was entirely weather-driven as temperatures were considerably warmer than normal in October of last year and in March of this year. Matter of fact, if we exclude the weather impact, in other words, if we exclude the weather, our load for the first half actually came in slightly below budget. The second factor, lower O&M, contributed $5 million to our favorable income variance. About half of this, good news, reflects unfilled vacancies, while the rest of the variance is primarily timing related. Investment income also was favorable to budget to the tune of $1.5 million, and there were two reasons for this. Interest rates and cash balances have been higher than projected, and we received a $900,000 settlement check from Citigroup earlier this year. This amount settled charges that Citigroup had defrauded government entities by manipulating LIBOR, an interest rate benchmark that underlies a wide range of interest rate derivative transactions. Because of these three factors, we are entering the second half of our fiscal year with better than budgeted financial results. And this will definitely help us weather the upcoming economic uncertainties. So the first question you must be asking yourselves is, what does our load look like given all the school closures and the governor's safer at home order? While we don't have April results yet, we have seen a notable difference in how our daily loads by customer class, how they look for about a month now. First, let's take a look at our commercial sales. As you can expect, our commercial load has been negatively affected by the governor's order. And the key question is, by how much? In order to estimate it, we resorted to regression analysis. Using smart meter data, we were able to identify daily loads by customer class, and we plotted these relative to the average daily temperature. We chose to perform the analysis this way because there is a strong correlation between commercial sales and the weather, as you can clearly see by the scatter plots and the regression lines running through them. The hotter the average daily temperature, the higher the consumption. The scatter plot in blue reflects commercial consumption levels before the governor's order took effect, while the scatter plot in red reflects consumption thereafter. And you can clearly see that there has in fact been a noticeable decline in commercial sales. Matter of fact, based on the difference between the two regression lines, we estimate our commercial load will come in about 12 to 13% below where it otherwise would have been. So now let's take a look at the residential class, whose consumption is also affected by weather. Oops, wrong way, sorry. We plotted residential consumption the same way we plotted that of our commercial class, and we saw a completely different trend. Instead of a drop in sales, it appears that school closures and the governor's order have resulted in an increase in residential load. Remember, the blue reflects consumption before the order, red reflects consumption after the order. Now, I use the word appear. I said there appears to be an impact, and that's because the scatter plots are not as clearly defined as they were with the commercial class. But when you do run a regression analysis, that does seem to indicate that the residential sales will come in about 11 to 13% higher than they would have otherwise. What's interesting is we performed the same analysis on our large industrial customers and found they were down very slightly, about 1%. And this makes sense given many of our largest customers are in the food or medical industries. Of course, we won't know actual load results until we close the month of April, but this trend that I'm showing you, this is the trend we've seen through April 24th. So what does this all mean for the full fiscal year? Let's start with a look at our revenue. The following graph depicts the anticipated changes in retail revenue for the entire year. The bars in green reflect increases in load, while those in red reflect a decline. This is a rough projection as there are still a lot of unknowns, the principal one being what is going to happen to the economy during the second half of the calendar year. Because of this uncertainty, we tried to be as conservative as possible in our forecasting. As you saw earlier in this presentation, the retail revenue for the first half of the fiscal year was $3.6 million above budget. And this solid performance is depicted by the first green bar. The next bar in red reflects our best estimate as to what may happen to commercial and industrial revenue in April and May. If you recall, we projected commercial consumption to decline 12 to 13% and industrial sales to decline 1% in April. To be conservative, we're assuming that the same level of decline occurs in May, despite the fact that some businesses have been opening up. This decline translates into a total drop in revenue of $1.5 million. On the positive side, higher residential sales are expected to increase our revenues by $1.1 million between April and May. Unfortunately, what happens next is the big unknown. Most, if not all, economists are projecting a recession, but the degree of its depth and its shape is still being debated. Because of this uncertainty, we assumed we'd enter a recessionary period similar to the one we experienced in 2008. During that time period, our residential and commercial load decreased about 5% year over year. Assuming this level of decline, our revenues, our second half revenues would then drop by 4.9 million between June and September. So in total, when you sum all the bars up, we are projecting our revenue to come in about 1.7 million below budget. Because of this shortfall and the uncertainty surrounding the economy, we've undertaken a number of cost-cutting measures to offset the potential drop in revenue. And let me walk you through those now. I'd like to emphasize that these savings are all non-personnel related. We'll discuss the impact of the city's hiring freeze on personnel costs in just a minute. The first column on the table reflects O&M expense cost savings, while the second column reflects cuts in capital expenditures. The fourth column on your right reflects the O&M cost savings as a percent of the available O&M budget as of the end of March. We ascertain these savings by asking each division to review their O&M and capital budgets and identify areas or projects that could be cut. For example, travel and training is being severely curtailed, as are contractual services and contract labor. On the capital side, non-essential projects were either postponed or eliminated. Finally, to ensure that the identified cost savings are achieved, we've sequestered each division's budget by the amounts they'd identified. So what does this year's financial position look like, given all the changes we discussed, the decrease in revenue and these cost savings we identified? The most effective way to do this is to look at our year-end cash and our days cash projections, since we all know cash is king. To start with, we budgeted almost $115 million of cash on hand at the end of fiscal year 2020. We currently expect to end the year up slightly from budget at 116.5, so that's a 1.5 million higher. And listed on the slide are the drivers, both negative and positive. As we discussed earlier, we project our revenue to fall short of budget by 1.7 million. However, as I also mentioned, LE will offset the decrease in revenue by cutting its O&M and capital costs in the second half by 2.8. Additionally, our vacancies and the hiring freeze we've just enacted will provide another 3.6 million of cash. Investment income will also be up relative to budget. As you saw on the first slide, investment income was above budget for the first half of the fiscal year, and we expect that trend to continue through September. There are two factors, however, that will reduce our cash. First of all is the capital that was carried over from last year, which had not been factored into the budget's cash on hand. I estimate these additional expenditures will reduce our cash by about $4 million. Secondly, we anticipate our collections to drop and hence our receivables to increase as we work with our customers and provide extended payment arrangements for those who have been adversely impacted by the economy shutdown. We base this estimate on what happened subsequent to Irma. As a result of these changes, we expect to end the year with 210 days of cash. Now, I know this sounds like we've got room to maneuver, but we honestly don't when you look at the long term. And then let me explain to you what I mean. The graph on the slide depicts the latest days cash projection through fiscal year 28, assuming we face a 36-month recession starting this fiscal year, and we borrow 100 million to invest in new generation. As you can see, we are projecting a decline in days cash between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 24 during the recessionary period. You'll also notice that this decline has us bottoming out very close to the AA floor of 150 days cash. So monitoring this metric will be critical as we go forward. We also need to end this fiscal year with as much cash on hand as possible so we can weather the projected decline in the metric. Starting in fiscal year 25, our days cash begins to recover as the cost savings associated with shutting Unit 3 down start to flow through. So in summary, although we expect the coronavirus to have an adverse impact on our revenue this year, our second half cost savings should more than offset the decline, such that we should end the year with about 210 days of cash. Looking forward, however, we'll need to closely monitor our cash levels as inflation is expected to continue to outpace our load growth, particularly during a recessionary period. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the committee, Commissioner McCarley? And then Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Gina. That was really thorough and very well done. So thank you for that. When I'm looking at this last slide of the days cash on hand projections for 24, what happens if it does slip out of the AA range? Like, how do we rally from that if that indeed happens?
What the rating agencies look at are trends, and they try to understand what's driving the trend. The fact that it's declining, but still in the early years, the fact that it's declining, but still above the 150 isn't a cause for worry. And then as we get closer to fiscal year 24, they'll see that by 25, things reverse themselves. So I don't think this is going to be a problem. It's just a 1-year dip. But again, we do have to monitor the metric. We don't want it to really go down below 150.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Jacoby,
Yes.
in sharing what you shared with us, and thank you again for the presentation. I guess my question kind of preceded what you were going to share with us, but good information to know what we can plan and how you're planning to make sure that we stay as solvent, fiscally solvent. But now moving forward with the phase out situation of Unit 3, thinking in terms of what you've shared with us all along. So all this encompasses still Unit 3 being phased out in as timely manner as we plan, dealing with personnel issues regarding Unit 3 phase out as well. So all this is taken consideration. So Unit 3 still, there will be no adverse effect, do you think, in our phasing out of Unit 3 as planned?
Could you repeat that? You were asking whether Unit 3?
There will not be any effect on the phase out of Unit 3 as planned, even though we're looking at what may be happening here on a fiscal situation.
Yeah, what's driving the drop in the days cash really is just the fact that inflation is outpacing our load growth, particularly during the first 3 years and during this recessionary environment.
I would, Commissioner Walker, I'd also add that we have been considering the impacts of Unit 3 throughout this, and so this is factored in. I mean, and obviously Gina's forecast is based on what we think we can see. So as you mentioned before, things can change, and it can be a very fluid environment. And we'll adjust if we need to at that point in time. But as it says right now, it includes Unit 3 and all the issues and benefits that brings.
And that's my question. Making sure that what we know we plan to do and what we still forecast for Unit 3 phase out with what we know we have to do and things we're doing fiscally right now to support LE and its LE's total operations. This phase out situation will not have an adverse effect on what we're doing.
Assuming everything stays the way that we believe it to be, you're absolutely right. We'll be just fine.
Commissioner Madden. Commissioner Madden, you're still muted. Sorry. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if I was able to say thank you so much to Gina Jacoby. That was a wonderful presentation, and I know that took a lot of work, and not just work, but a lot of foresight. And thank you, Joel, and to your entire staff for looking at those O&M budget cuts. I mean, I just can't thank you enough for quickly looking to see what you could do to make sure that those losses in loads, are thought about sooner rather than later for financial security. I did want to ask, it says here that this assumes a 36-month recession with the FEMA reimbursement. Have we heard anything that would make us doubt FEMA reimbursement with the COVID situation?
So far, things are moving through FEMA. We just got another $1 million approved. And we should be seeing that $1 million come in. It's in the state's hands right now, but it should be, I mean, it's already been approved by FEMA as well as the state. So it's in we're just awaiting that receivable. So I don't see anything on I mean, all the answers that we've given, we've received a number of RFIs and all our answers have been favorably received. So we haven't really run into any particular roadblocks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Has the COVID, just piggybacking on that just a second, has the COVID scenario affected the Calpine installation negatively at all?
I actually had a comment about that. Generally, it has not. We've been working on that, and we were in a maintenance cycle with our Unit 3 during this whole time. But we hit a little bit of a snag with the MGT2, the Calpine, formerly Calpine unit. And so instead of having it online and running, we had it up and running, but we found some issues. I'm still going to go back to, it's like working on an old house. You're going to discover things as you go, and you're going to fix them as you go too. So we're still running into a few things, Mr. Mayor. I'm anticipating we're looking at maybe a late June finish and start up.
Other comments by the committee? Let's raise your hands. I see Dr. Childs and then Mr. Johnson. You're showing that you're unmuted, but you may be muted on your headphone or, yeah, no. There you go.
I was.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you for these presentations. I think they're very helpful and useful. I wanted to go back to a comment Commissioner Madden had earlier about positive reviews on Google. I think it's important to maybe identify as well the issues among our customers that kind of drive sentiment. And I think some of it is periodic and some of it is sort of constant. And when we look at our strategic plan and look at rate structures, I would be remiss as one of the members that represents customers outside of the city limits to go back and relook at the story that we tell and the logic behind why we continue to have the surcharge for customers outside of the city limits, but to make the pitch from the point of view of those customers outside of the city limits rather than from the point of view of people inside the city limits. I think that would go a long way to increase transparency as well as to invite people into the discussion as to how we resolve that particular issue. And I know it ignites passions from the past, but I think it would be important, at least as one of the representatives of those customers, to bring that voice to the table. So I just wanted to mention that.
Any response to that? I guess Clark maybe, or Joel, either one.
I'll just suggest this is a conversation we have every single time that we have a rate case brought forward, and rightly so. So that's duly noted with your comments to try to shape that conversation. We want to make sure that it's inclusive. I hope that I live long enough that we can solve this dilemma and just fold it into our normal revenue from operations. I just got to keep living. But we will take that under advisement and try to do a better job with that next time. Dr. Childs, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ivey. And I might want to just maybe set up an appointment just to chat with you about a couple of things regarding how we display the bill to the customers outside of the city limits as well. Might have some suggestions.
Okay, and please know that we're just about to roll out the new bill, I think, next month. So
yeah, we might want to check on how we label the surcharge. I think it still says Florida surcharge, and I think we agreed at a previous committee meeting months ago that would change it to be more transparent to indicate that it's a city surcharge, not a state surcharge.
I believe you're right in that. So we'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wise, and that takes us to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Good job, Gina. Couple of questions or comments. Let me start off by saying this. If we have we can all pray that we do not have a 36-month recession as a result of this, because I think your numbers are, I'm very much hopeful that your numbers are very conservative and they are a worst case scenario. Explain a little bit on how flexible are these numbers with regards to the cuts? Because you mentioned contract cuts. And wouldn't those contract cuts to some extent be local vendors and stuff that we have business with that we would be discontinuing doing business with them, or is that something else?
A lot of it is contract labor that, just temporary labor that we bring in.
Could you explain what you're talking about there? Because those are like cutting employees, really.
Yeah, although they're not, some of them work part-time, some of them, they don't work, again, some are full-time.
I would assume that those are people that we wouldn't be hiring them as contract if we didn't need them.
That is correct, and we anticipate as things, if the economy does turn into a recessionary type situation, which we anticipate that we probably won't need those people on board. We won't have for example, the new development that we're having now.
If I can jump in too, Mr. Johnson, we had several contract employees for the reasons that you stated, because we needed them. They were working in the call center, for example. When the Safer at Home order came out, we went from about 1,000 calls a day down to about 200. And so at the same time, we were asking some of our employees to go home, shelter in place, and then rotate once a week in and out of the call center again. Couldn't actually justify keeping the contract labor as a paid, quote, employee, so to speak, while we're asking, everybody else to be sheltering at home and not really putting in a good 8-hour day. And I'm not saying that right, but I hope you get my point. And so we're taking a look at those positions and trying to make a determination. Is that something that we need to ramp back up for that quickly? Or is that something that we can look at over time? And right now, and according to our forecast, we're going to delay bringing those positions back online. So we're doing that with others as well. There were some temporary positions, some internships. I hate the fact that we're not able to continue the internships, but at the same time, that there's bills to be paid, and we got to make sure we're doing our part just like any other private business would do. Even though we're not private, we try to behave that way. So we're just trying to be fiscally responsible.
Okay, I understand that. What I'm trying to come up with is, and I look at things like capital cuts, and I'm concerned about capital cuts because I'm assuming we're not cutting stuff that doesn't need to be done. We're a little bit, to use the term, kicking the can down the road on some capital issues or whatever. And I hate to see us push back capital things that need to be done without, because sometimes once you pull the trigger on a contract or a capital related thing, it's tough to get it going again. And if we don't need to cut it, maybe that's something we need to look at things that if it's inflexible, we need to take a second and third hard look at it before we cut those things out, because capital is usually pretty important stuff.
Yeah. So let's just address that real quick, because we got, on the order of a $40 million capital budget, and we're cutting, I don't remember the number, Gina, it's like $1.5 million or something.
That's correct.
And so we're cutting that because we can. So one of the projects, which I think is a capital project, we were looking at a building refurbishment for this building that I'm in right now. It hasn't been done in a very, very long time, but it's also something that we can kick the can down the road because it's not absolutely imperative right now. So those are the kinds of things that we're taking a look at deferring. If there's projects that are a must-have, a need, we're not deferring those. We're not cutting them out of the budget. We're doing those. So it's a really small piece of the pie in the grand scheme of things, and I'm comfortable that we're not jeopardizing the system by any means. We're still doing the projects that we should do.
If I could make just a couple more comments, I guess we'll all believe a little bit better in trickle-down economics after this is done. But because there's no question that that's a little bit what we face. And Jack might remember this. When I was at Linder Machinery, we went through a couple of tough years, and we took some huge losses at the time and chose to make those decisions because we wanted to hold on to people. And Scott Linder at the time made this, and we took very, very large losses. But we felt like that coming out of it, if we cut our people too much, or we did too much in certain areas, that it would hurt us coming out of the time. And this was back in the 80s. So I just think that, first of all, I am hope to pray that we do not have a 36-month recession out of this. And because that would be, but also looking and trying to be as flexible as possible and careful about cutting things like internships, because that's the future of our industry. If we start cutting internships, then we may be looking at our future employees going elsewhere. And just be really careful with this on how we work this so that we don't cripple ourselves, long term to try to meet some just short term objectives. That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in summary, I think what Mr. Johnson's emphasizing, and I think probably a lot of us would concur, is that this is a conservative budget, and we're grateful for that. As we look at 36 months, I would think a recessionary period would be the worst at about half that level. But meanwhile, we don't cut the personnel needs, developments that we need to do, which you have as part of the strategic plan, and the things that need to be done on an equipment basis that can't be kicked down the road are done as they need to be done. That would be a recommendation.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to point out too, we have been reducing our staff size for years, even before I got here. When I got here, we accelerated that pace just a little bit, and we're down significantly. I think the number of active employees is about 482, and it was well over 550 when I got here. So partially in an effort to make sure that we were ready for the next downturn, economic downturn, because it's cyclical, it comes, and whether you want it to or not, it's going to show up. So I just applaud the efforts of staff. Sometimes these things are hard to buy into, but when something like this happens, that's all of a sudden when reality hits and we know what we've been fighting for, and we've been fighting for this day. So I'm trying very hard to make sure that we don't have to be losing staff because of something like this, because we're doing what we should be doing all along.
Excellent, excellent. Any other comments from any committee members on this? Commissioner or Committee Member Troutman.
Mr. Ivey, in our communication that we had leading up to this meeting, does these numbers in this conservative budget include any type of new revenue that you indicated may be coming from those industries that are coming online with mask production and things of that such? That's not inclusive of this, is it?
I doubt that we had the ability to identify those. There's a couple of businesses that are manufacturing like face shields and face masks and things like that here in Lakeland, which is awesome. That's American ingenuity at its best. I doubt that we had time to react to try to get a sense of what those individual customers would be contributing, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably going to be small. I don't think it's going to change the numbers drastically.
What's really interesting to see is how it drifts from the commercial back to the residential, where the people are going. And also during the day, the reason some of that regression occurred with respect to people at home is that, there are cutbacks on residential during the day. So it's not as dramatic in the heat of the summer on the residential side as it is on the commercial side, which has to run during those periods of time.
Mr. Mayor, I need to report something to you all as well. Part of our measures of austerity that we've taken, and it's been pretty unpopular because I know some of you have heard from some developer friends of ours. But we have a contribution in native construction, a line extension policy is what we call it. This involves building new facilities to serve newer speculative customers. We made a change on the fly based on what we were seeing from our revenue standpoint. We're now requiring developers to participate much more in the funding of these new projects with the prospects of receiving a rebate if the load materializes in a 36-month period of time. We have that by policy, but we have that policy relaxed as we were going through this really good economic time prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. And I just want to say that that's all on me. I made that decision very quickly. We didn't have enough time to adequately communicate that, but we are working on communicating with our developer friends as we go, as we speak. But I'm hoping, just like everyone else, that this is not a long, drawn-out recession. We can end this sooner rather than later.
And the net result of that is, if I could restate it simply, is that we shift that contribution by the developer on a 36-month cash flow spread. They have to achieve that stated load capacity, in which case they'll get the benefit of the original concession. However, if they didn't do that, it'd be pro rata to the extent that they had load.
This is a customer protection mechanism that we have to make sure the investments that we're making are prudent and you know, we're making those investments to make money off of them.
Okay. Questions on that at all? From any? Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Could Joel or Cindy, or could someone send us a recap of that, of just what you said and the change and the details? That'd be helpful to see that and to be able to explain it if we're asked.
Okay, I sure will. I've had a couple of phone calls from city commissioners. So, and to those of you that got those calls, I apologize. That happened very, very fast. But we certainly will send something out.
Commissioner McCarley.
Joel, I just wanted to thank you for your quick response whenever you and I touched base the other day on that. And also Joey Curry, I think helped remedy part of that too, and was very helpful. And in addition, just really quick, the scam that came about on Saturday via robocalls, I wanted to bring that up really quick. I had a constituent call in kind of a panic that we were going to cut their power in 30 minutes, and Joel was great. I figured it was a scam, but I texted him. He got right back to me and then pushed out on his own Facebook page that was a scam. And I think now Lakeland Electric and the city through Kevin's office has pushed it out as well. So thank you all for being very responsive to that.
Thank you. Thank you for representing so well.
Excellent. Any other comments? All right, sir, what's next?
Okay, I just had some follow-on comments, and I'd like to turn it over to Ramona we got one agreement we need to talk about. But my last set of comments are more operational. Starting today, it's the beginning to start bringing our folks back from their rotational safer at home status to whatever our new normal is going to be. By May 18th, we should be significantly there. And by June 1st, almost entirely there. And I say almost because we may still have a couple of employees that are in that age and health category that we need to make sure we're taking care of. We do not intend to begin disconnecting service for non-pay until mid-June. So we still have plenty of time to get our ducks in a row. We're working with our customers, and where our plan is to try to provide up to 6 months of payment arrangements, and maybe that'll help ease some of the burden. We're still figuring some of this stuff out. We're not ready to have the conversations with our customers directly, but hopefully later this week or even next week, we should be ready to start that process and set up those payment arrangements. And just finally on that, we do not anticipate, bringing about the fees, the late fees and the disconnect fees or reconnect fees until the end of September. So we're going to do what we can to ease the pain on this as much as possible.
Good, wonderful steps.
Well, we've already talked about MGT2, Mr. Mayor, so that's all I've got. I'd be happy to turn it over to Ramona at this point.
All right, Ramona, what is the recommendation?
Good afternoon, Ramona Sirianni for the City Attorney's Office. We just have one item under the utility portion. This is an amendment to the agreement with Doble Engineering Company. This is an extension to provide an extension of the agreement for a 3-year term, as well as update some rates and revise some of the services being provided. This is for equipment and also services provided by Doble. This equipment works as predictive technology, which I think we discussed on Friday at Agenda Study, to help look at the functioning of the transformers and assess problems before they become major issues, and it significantly reduces the amount of we need to spend on transformers. And using Doble's database, they have an extensive historical database of transformer data that they are able to compare when they assess looking at our transformers and provide updates and services. The total cost of the 3-year agreement is $138,570. Again, that's a 3-year term, and that's included in Lakeland Electric's FY20 budget. And we would ask for your favorable approval.
All right, any questions by the committee? Well, first of all, I guess we need a motion to approve. And I see one from committee member English and a second by Commissioner Walker. All right, any discussion? This is a means of making certain that we have advance warning on transformers so that we know if something's irregular and we save money using the system as opposed to spend it retroactively. Mm-hmm. Any comments by anyone in the audience? Seeing none, if you're in favor, hold your hand up so it's visible, please. If you're opposed, the same sign. Unanimously passes, unless your cheek scratch, Jack, was an objection. No, I knew it was not. All right, anything else?
That's it for us, Mr. Mayor.
Well, with that, we have 55 minutes to use leisurely before we begin our commission meeting. Thank you so much. Appreciate your great presentation.
Thank you.
Wait, I see before we go, a comment from committee member Johnson.
He's saying goodbye, I think.
I was just saying goodbye. I have no more comments.
I'm hand sensitive. I apologize. Bye.